Welcome, my friend. The storm rages outside, but here, in the quiet of this story, I invite you to find peace. Let the sound of the rain and the distant thunder guide you as you drift into a place of calm. This story is my gift to you, a gentle companion for a night of restful sleep. Relax, let go of the day, and let the story carry you into dreams. The storm had come out of nowhere. It wasn't supposed to be this bad, but here I was, barreling down the highway with rain slashing across my windshield like 1,000 needles. The wipers couldn't keep up, and the visibility was quickly fading as the darkness of the night consumed everything around me. I had been on this stretch of road 100 times before, but tonight something felt off. Maybe it was the storm, or maybe it was just me. I was too tired, too worn out from hours on the road. But I had to push on. There was nowhere to stop, not this late, not with the rain this bad. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights from another vehicle. Okay, how is the thunder? Love it. Let's go. But the road was empty. It was just me, the endless rain, and the faint hum of the engine. I turned my attention back to the road, trying to shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. But as I did, I saw it, a figure, just a flash, but it was there, standing on the side of the road, drenched by the rain, its arm raised as though it were hitchhiking. A person, someone in need of a ride. I slowed the truck, not out of kindness, but because something in my gut told me I should. I pulled over to the side of the road, the tires skidding slightly in the wet conditions. The rain was relentless, hammering against the roof of the truck like a drum. I rolled down the window just a crack, squinting into the downpour. The figure was still there, a man, soaked to the bone, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket. He was standing motionless, his arms still raised in that strange, unsettling way. Need a ride? I asked, my voice barely audible over the storm. The figure didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at me with that same unwavering posture. His face was still hidden, but I could feel his eyes on me, cold, empty, like there was no soul behind them. Now I can continue the story. Go on to the story. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't right. I leaned over to unlock the passenger door, but the figure didn't move. Hey, I called again, my voice growing more urgent, but the man remained still, like he didn't hear me. I was about to roll the window up when something strange happened. The figure started to walk toward me, but it wasn't like a normal person walking. It was as if he was gliding over the wet ground, moving without effort, almost unnaturally smooth, like his feet didn't even touch the earth. I slammed the truck into drive, ready to take off, but before I could pull away, the man appeared at the passenger window. He wasn't just standing there anymore. He was inside. I froze, my heart racing, my breath coming in short, panic bursts. The figure was inside the truck. There was no way he could have moved that quickly. No way. I stared at him, unable to look away. His face was still hidden beneath the hood, but his presence filled the cab, suffocating, cold. The air felt heavier, almost as if the storm outside had been sucked into the truck. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, pressing in on my thoughts. Who are you? I managed to choke out, my voice strained. The figure didn't respond. He just sat there, staring straight ahead. I could feel the coldness radiating off him, seeping into the truck, into me. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain pounding against the roof. But it wasn't just the storm I could hear. There was something else now. Whispers, faint, distant at first, but growing louder. I shook my head, trying to focus. The whispers were in the back of my mind, but when I glanced to the passenger seat again, the figure was still there, motionless. Hey, I shouted, my pulse racing as I turned to face him. Who are you? What do you want? The man didn't answer. His head slowly turned toward me. His eyes were still hidden in shadow. My skin crawled. I wanted to reach for the door handle and throw myself out of the truck, but I couldn't move. My body felt frozen, trapped. I blinked and for a split second, just a second, the figure's face was visible. But it wasn't a face I recognized. It was wrong. The features were blurred, distorted, as though his face was made of smoke, shifting and changing in ways that defied logic. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal, the truck lurching forward. But when I looked back at the passenger seat, the figure was still there. He hadn't moved. He hadn't even flinched. My heart pounded as I sped down the road, the headlights cutting through the mist. The whispers were still there, louder now, crawling beneath my skin, filling my mind with a sense of dread. I couldn't escape. The figure didn't speak. He didn't need to. I tried to look at the road, tried to focus, but every time I glanced to the passenger seat, Okay, how is the thunder? Love it. Let's go. I could feel his presence beside me. It was like he was inside my head, his cold eyes boring into me, waiting for something. What does he want? I thought. What does he want from me? And then the whispers came again, clearer now, the words forming in my mind. You can't run. You'll never escape. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding on the wet road. But when I looked over, the figure was still sitting beside me, his eyes glowing faintly beneath the hood. It wasn't a person anymore. It wasn't even real. It was something else. I couldn't focus. The road was a blur, the headlights cutting through the fog, but the figure beside me was never out of my sight. It was as if the entire world had fallen away, leaving only me and him in the cab, trapped in some unnatural stillness. The whispers grew louder. They weren't just words anymore. They were feelings, cold, invasive, like something was crawling into my mind, digging deep and pulling out my worst fears. Turn back, the voice hissed, soft but chilling. You cannot outrun what's coming. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel, trying to shake the cold feeling wrapping itself around my chest. Turn back. What did that mean? Was this some kind of joke? I glanced at the figure again, but his face remained hidden beneath the hood. The air around me felt heavier now, thicker. The truck, once steady under my control, felt like it was struggling, as if the engine itself was fighting against me. The whispers didn't stop. They got louder, more urgent. You're lost. There's no way out. You belong to us now. Stop, I muttered under my breath, shaking my head as I gripped the wheel tighter. I needed to get a hold of myself. This couldn't be happening. I had to focus, get the truck back on the road, drive away. I slammed the pedal down, trying to get the truck to move faster, but the figure was still there, sitting beside me, as though it had always been. And then just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the whispers stopped, the truck lurched forward, and for a moment, I thought it was over. It felt calm, but then the truck veered to the left. I barely had time to react before the tires left the road. What the hell? I yelled, jerking the wheel, my body jerking with the motion. The fog outside, pressed against the truck like it was alive, pushing back against me, blocking my view of the road. I could feel the figure now. It wasn't just sitting there anymore. It was leaning closer, its presence growing heavier, suffocating. No one escapes. The voice whispered again, low and insidious, like it was coming from the very walls of the truck. You're mine. I threw the truck back on course, slamming my foot on the brake, trying to steady myself, but it didn't help. The more I drove, the more the figure seemed to move with me. Its shadow stretched across the passenger seat, filling the space, wrapping itself around my mind. I reached for the window, desperate for air, desperate to shake this feeling, but when I looked at the side mirror, my stomach dropped. The road behind me was completely different. The signs, the mile markers, were all gone, replaced with dense black trees and an open field. It was as if the road had shifted, twisted into a new direction, and I had no way of knowing how to get back. I was still driving, but the world around me had changed, and I was the one left behind. I slammed on the brakes again, the truck screeching to a halt. The world around me stood still, the rain hammering against the windows, and the figure beside me hadn't moved an inch. But now, I could feel something else, movement. I stared into the mirror again, my breath catching. There were lights behind me, headlights from another vehicle, but they were wrong. The lights were too bright, too blinding, and they didn't reflect off the road as they should have. Instead, they seemed to distort the surroundings, warping the edges of the road, as though they were not real. I looked at the figure beside me. It hadn't moved. Not a muscle. Not a single shift in posture. But I could feel it now more than ever. This thing wasn't just a passenger. It wasn't just a man. It was something deeper, darker, something that had always been waiting for me. The truck started shaking again, the headlights flickering, and I could feel the air in the cab grow colder. The voice was back, louder now, more urgent. You've been lost for so long. This road is mine, and you've always been a part of it. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't want to know. But the truck was no longer in my control. The world outside the window was a blur, the road turning into an endless tunnel of fog, and the figure beside me remained silent. But its presence felt louder than anything. The air was thick. The whispers were like an invasive presence in my brain, and my thoughts started to jumble together. I had to stop. I had to get out of here. But before I could react, the voice in my head spoke one last time, low and final. You'll never leave. This is your place now. The truck lurched forward, the tires spinning, but instead of moving down the road, it felt like I was driving into the fog, into nothing. The truck roared forward, the engine straining against the unseen force, pulling it into the void. The road had completely disappeared beneath me, replaced by nothing but endless fog. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly, I thought the bones would snap. But it didn't matter. The truck was moving on its own now, as if it were being driven by something, or someone else. The figure beside me remained still, its presence filling the cab with a cold, suffocating weight. It didn't need to move. I could feel it in my head. The whispers were louder now, filling the truck, swirling around me like a storm of thoughts and fears. Is that all? Okay, let's move on. Thanks God. My head felt like it was about to explode. You're mine, the figure whispered again, the words crawling through my veins. You always have been. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. But the words wouldn't come. Every time I opened my mouth, the only sound that escaped was a whisper of my own name, my own voice, but distorted and strange, as if it weren't really mine. The truck kept moving. The fog pressed in tighter, and then, suddenly there was a light, a dim flickering light ahead. At first I thought it was a distant sign, but as we got closer, it became clear that it was a house, a rundown shack, barely visible through the swirling mist, standing alone in the darkness. I couldn't tell what drew me to it, whether it was the need for something familiar, or the fact that I had no choice, but I felt a compulsion to drive straight toward it. Stop, please, I muttered under my breath, trying to slow the truck, but the engine refused to obey. The figure beside me hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but I could feel it. Its eyes were locked on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was controlling everything, that it was manipulating the world around me. We pulled into the yard of the house, the truck coming to a stop, just outside the rotting front door. The silence was overwhelming. I could feel my pulse in my ears, and my body felt heavier with every second I spent there. The figure beside me finally moved. It didn't speak, but its presence filled the truck, its weight pressing against my chest. This is where it ends, it said, its voice low and final, like the end of a story you've known all along. I felt the door to the truck open on its own, the handle turning with a force I couldn't explain. I didn't move. I couldn't. The whispers were so loud now, it was like the entire world was closing in on me. The figure stepped out of the truck, its shadow stretching far beyond the light. For a moment, I was paralyzed. I couldn't bring myself to follow it, but I couldn't stay here either. The air outside was thick and suffocating, but I was drawn to it. The house, the door, the unknown. I stepped out of the truck, my legs shaky, my heart pounding in my chest, and walked toward the house. My body moved against my will, as if I were being pulled by some invisible force. As I approached the door, it creaked open on its own. I stood there, just outside, waiting, almost expecting the figure to speak again. It didn't, but I knew it was there, waiting for me. And then the whisper stopped. Everything went quiet. I stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet as the door slammed shut behind me. The room inside was dark, almost too dark, and for a moment, I couldn't see anything. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw the walls. They were covered in photographs. Old yellowed images of people. But the faces were all blank. There were no eyes, no expressions, just white, empty space, where their faces should have been. And then I heard it. A soft chuckle, not from the figure beside me, but from somewhere deeper inside the house. It was too familiar. A laugh I had heard countless times before. A laugh that felt like my own. "You are home now," the figure said from the doorway. Its voice echoed through the house, cold and final. "You belong here. You always have." The house seemed to breathe, its creaking walls echoing with the soft whispers of memories long forgotten. I stood frozen in the doorway, the darkness inside swallowing me whole, and I could feel the weight of the figure's presence behind me. My chest was tight, my breath shallow, and yet, despite the terror crawling up my spine, something inside me knew I had to move forward. I stepped deeper into the house, my footsteps slow and uncertain, as the darkness wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. The photographs on the walls, their empty faces staring back at me, were unsettling. But it was the silence that unnerved me most. It was like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to acknowledge something I wasn't ready to face. The air was thick with the scent of decay and time, but something about the stillness was even more suffocating. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting the figure to be right behind me, but it wasn't. It wasn't following me. Instead, I heard it, the soft murmur of my own voice, whispering from somewhere deeper within the house. "Turn around." I froze, the words not coming from the figure, but from me. The same voice I'd heard countless times, the same voice I had been running from, the voice of doubt, of guilt, of everything I had tried to bury deep inside. "You've been here before." The walls around me seemed to close in, and I realized with growing horror that I had walked this path before, not physically, not literally, but somewhere, in my mind, I had visited this place. This house of shadows and empty faces. I had run from it all my life. But now I couldn't escape. "You don't belong anywhere else," the voice continued, whispering louder now, as if it were wrapping itself around my soul. "This is your home. This is who you are." My body trembled, my hands shaking as I stumbled through the hallway. The house seemed endless, its rooms stretching out in every direction, each one filled with more photographs of empty faces. The same faces, over and over again. I had to stop. I had to face this, whatever it was. But I couldn't move forward anymore. The fear had paralyzed me, keeping me trapped in this never-ending cycle of confusion. And then I saw it. In the very last room at the end of the hallway, a single light flickered. I walked toward it, my legs heavy, but something drew me in. Something in the darkness that I couldn't resist. When I entered the room, the air was cold, almost unbearable. In the center of the room, there was a mirror. It wasn't like any mirror I had ever seen. It wasn't just glass. It was alive. The reflection inside the mirror was me, but twisted. My face was there, yes, but my eyes were hollow, empty. I could see myself in the reflection, but the figure beside me was now inside the mirror, smiling at me, its face still hidden beneath the hood, the grin too wide, too dark. "You've always been one of us," the figure whispered. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was trapped, staring at myself, but it wasn't me anymore. The reflection in the mirror wasn't mine. It was the version of me I had always feared to face, the part of me that I had tried to bury, the part of me that the figure had always known. "You've been running from this," the voice murmured, softer now, but still piercing. "But now you're home." And in that moment, the mirror cracked. I watched, unable to do anything, as the crack spread through the glass, cutting through my reflection. The figure stepped forward, its hand reaching out, and I knew then that there was no escaping it. There was no escaping myself. The mirror shattered into pieces, and with it, the last remnants of my resistance. I was home, but I didn't know if I was ever meant to leave. We spend our lives running from who we are, but only by facing ourselves can we find peace. There's nowhere to run when the truth catches up.